Good morning. Welcome to Yin. Today we will need props. Ideally, a bolster and a blanket, or some version of a bolster and a blanket. And we're going to start with both for this first pose. So for the first pose, if you have the blanket, you want it to be open like a square about this big, and then you'll set it down and roll it tight. And that's what you're going for, is a roll, something soft. It could be a pillow. If you have a pillow nearby, that could maybe work. Someone's going to try a foam roller, which I think is great. A rolled up yoga mat, I really like. That's the way to go. And then you'll take the bolster the wide way in front of you. So you'll come to hands and knees. Bolster will be in front of you the wide way. And the point of this roll is to rest that curve of the foot and the leg on top of that. So your feet aren't resting down on the mat. It just makes it a little bit more comfortable. If you don't have anything, it's not a big deal. You can still do this. Just have something definitely under the hips. So when you come to hands and knees, hands are in front of the bolster. Tops of the feet are on this roll where the curve of the leg and the foot meet. And then you'll start to walk forward. We want the hips on the bolster, not the belly. So make sure the navel is ahead of the bolster. You'll lie down. You might need to adjust a little bit. Make sure the belly is free. It's ahead of the bolster. And as you come down onto your chest, you could, two options with the arms. You can place one hand on top of the other and just rest the forehead down. If this doesn't work for the upper body for whatever reason, you can bring the arms down by the sides and turn the head one direction and just rest this way. But if it's okay to keep the hands stacked, elbows out wide, try that. So starting our yin practice today in a back bend, hips are lifted, maybe the feet are lifted too if you have something underneath them. And you feel this sense of floating, chest is reaching forward. Start to take a deeper breath in through the nose. Back out through the nose. Two more like that together. Deep breath in through the nose. Long breath back out through the nose. Again, deep breath in. Slow breath out. Keep going on your own. As you listen to the sound of your own breath, see if you can match the length of the inhale with the length of the exhale. And even though you're not moving, you're starting to feel this pose take shape in the body. The hips are lifted with the support of the bolster. The knees are resting down on the mat. Maybe the feet are lifted if you have something underneath them. Forehead's touching down on the hands, or maybe you have the head turned to one side. You'll start to lift the head, walk the hands in. So you bring the palms of the hands to the mat, come back to hands and knees, and you'll set the blanket off to the side. So you won't need it, just set it off to the side. You'll take this bolster, you'll move it forward just a little bit. So you want to keep some room of the mat ahead of you. And then the forearms will come down to the mat ahead of the bolster. You'll walk the feet back and you're coming into a supported Sphinx pose. So tops of the feet are down on the mat, chest is reaching forward, back of the neck stays long. Hands and forearms are down, pressing down, not too hard, but just enough so you can keep the chest lifted. Feet are hip width distance apart. And as you keep opening up across the chest and sending the heart forward, keep that. Just start to bring the chin down toward the chest. It doesn't have to touch. We're just trying to get some length in the backside of the neck without letting the chest collapse. So 2 different things happening at the same time with the upper body. And then you'll take the left ear and bring it over toward the left shoulder. Keep that right shoulder in place. So it's moving back, and that's how you get the length on the right side of the neck. Breathe into the right side of the neck. Chin starts to come back down toward the chest. And the right ear makes its way over to the right shoulder just until you maximize the length on the left side of the neck, pulling that left shoulder back, reaching the heart forward at the same time. And trying not to bring that right shoulder up to meet the ear. It's the ear going down toward the shoulder. It's not going to touch. And chin comes back down toward the chest. Stay here. Just feel the length in both sides of the neck, back of the neck, and then slowly start to bring the left ear over toward the left shoulder and make your way the other direction. So you go as slow as you want. Keep the eyes closed. Just going side to side in this half moon shape. If there is one spot that feels like you should stay there and breathe, you can do that. Otherwise, you can keep the movement slow and continuous. And you'll finish the cycle that you're on, eventually bringing the chin back down toward the chest. Bring the head back to Sphinx pose. So you're not bringing it all the way back. You're just lengthening the backside of the neck, lifting the head, still keeping the gaze down the bridge of the nose, whether or not the eyes are open or closed. And if you do have the eyes closed, start to open them. You'll come up onto the hands enough so that you can come up onto hands and knees, just to move the bolster out of the way. So you won't need any props for the next pose. You'll come back down onto your stomach, lying on your stomach, but this time we'll bring the left arm out to the side. And we want to make sure that this left hand is in line with the left shoulder. So look now, because you're going to turn away from it. You'll just keep the arm there and then look the other way. So you're looking to the right. Bring the left side of the head down onto the mat so it can rest. If it doesn't reach, put something underneath it, blanket, bolster, pillow, whatever you have. Right hand right underneath the shoulder. So it's palms on the mat. You can bring the feet closer together or keep them hip width distance apart, but you'll start to press into this right hand to roll back onto the left shoulder. So you're in control here. You want to listen to the left shoulder, keep the head down on the mat, or if you're resting on something, that's fine too. But you're here for a little while. So don't go as far into it as you possibly can. Let the long hold open up the shoulder and the chest. So you let go of some of that effort, easing your way in with the pressure of that right hand. So maybe you come more forward toward the stomach on the mat if it's too much. Maybe you go a little deeper if it's not enough. So we're starting with the upper body today in our practice, and we'll work our way down. Take another inhale in through the nose, back out. Start to come back onto your stomach, rolling back onto your stomach, and we'll go straight over to the other side. So starting with the right arm, reaching outside of the shoulder, hand in line with the shoulder, left hand comes to the mat right underneath the left shoulder. Turn the head so that you can rest the right side of the head down onto the mat, and then grab something if you want to rest the head up a little bit higher. And then you'll maybe bring the feet closer together or keep them hip width. Press into the left hand to start to roll back onto this right shoulder, keeping the head down on the mat. Try not to go too far in. Find an easy place to be where you still feel an opening in the right side chest and shoulder. Sometimes in this pose, we have a tendency to stick the bum way out behind us. See if you can get a longer line from the head to the feet. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you feel like the knees want to bend forward or the hips want to stick back behind you, see if you can lengthen a little bit more and then start to soften into the pose. Whatever that means for you. Could mean just closing the eyes and focusing on the breath. Breathe in a little deeper through the nose. Back out through the nose. Start to make your way onto your stomach again. And from here, just stack the hands one on top of the other. Rest the forehead down. Still in a subtle back bend, but the hips are down on the mat. You don't have the lift of the bolster. Tops of the feet are down on the mat. Rebounding from that upper body opening a little bit before we move on. So 2 options for this next pose. You can start to lift the chest, bring the forearms down and come back into Sphinx pose. You could put a bolster underneath you if you'd like, or you could come up to hands and knees, coming into melting heart pose. So some of you don't like this pose. If that's you, then just stick with Sphinx pose. Melting heart pose. Knees and hips stay in one line. You bring the forearms down to the mat and then walk the elbows forward, not as far as you can go because you will be here for a while. Forehead comes down to the mat and you rest here. Belly hugs in a little bit, so you keep the lower back long. And we just stay here. So chest is reaching forward. This is a bigger pose, a bigger back bend, melting heart. So sometimes it's nice to do another one before it. Also, opening up the shoulders can give you a little space and a little more space and freedom in the upper back. Sphinx pose is a similar shape too. If you're in melting heart pose, forehead down on the mat, you could start to walk the elbows a little farther forward if you feel like there's enough space for that and you're finding that opening. Some of you might be comfortable bringing the hands together like prayer and back behind the head. This is definitely deeper. Only take it if it feels good. Or come back a step to where you can start to be in the pose without thinking about it. If the hands are behind the head and there is a little bit more room, you could walk the elbows forward a little bit more, but only if you're staying away from your edge. And listening to the heart is a good way to be in a pose. If your heart rate starts to pick up, that's probably a sign that you've gone too far. This is a cooling practice, so we don't even want to really feel the heartbeat all too much. If you have the hands back behind the head, bring the hands back down to the mat. We'll lift the head and we'll all come up to hands and knees wherever we are. Just to come to, well, let's start with hands and knees. Let's do a few rounds of cat-cow. That'll feel good at this point. So stack the shoulders over the wrists, hips over the knees, reach the heart forward, lift the tail, a familiar shape, and then go slow. Start to round the spine, coming into cat pose. Chin comes in toward the chest. Now you're moving the spine in the opposite direction. Inhale, reach the heart forward. Exhale, round. And now you can just go at your own pace. Eyes closed if you want. Just go slow. And ease your way into the cat poses, the rounding of the spine. You don't need to round the spine as much as you possibly can in the first one. Each one just goes a little deeper. One more cycle. Back to a neutral spine. Bring the feet over to one side and come to seated on the mat with the legs extended out in front of you. And then you can just scoot forward, come down onto your, maybe have a block nearby. Just set it next to the hips. Come down onto your back. And we'll come into a spinal twist. So you'll scoot the hips over to the right, bring the knees over to the left. Right arm reaches outside the shoulder. But keeping it easy, twist doesn't need to be as deep as you can go. Block is here in case you want to bring it between the knees. You could also use a bolster or a blanket if you want something softer, but it'll also bring the knees a little closer together, those other options. So see which one feels better in your body. With the eyes closed, maybe you keep the nose pointing up, or maybe it starts to fall over the right shoulder. See where you can bring the twist up the spine with as little effort as possible. You'll start to make your way onto your back again. If you have something between the knees, set it off to the side. Use the feet to find center on your back. Knees come in toward the chest, hang on to each knee, and then you'll just move the knees around in a circle, keeping the knees and the feet together, using this as a counter. And then switch the direction of the circles, go the other way. And feet will come down to the mat. Scoot the hips over to the left, bring the knees to the right. If you want something between the knees, grab it, place it there. Left arm can reach out to the left. Maybe the nose starts to go over the left shoulder. It doesn't have to, but slowly finding your way into your twist, going the opposite direction. So pointing the body in the way you want it to go, and then just leaving it there to go wherever it needs to be. So maybe a little deeper in, maybe it needs to come out a little bit. You'll come back to center on your back. Take your time in the transition, remove anything between the knees. Use the feet to find center on your back. And bring the knees in toward the chest, hang on to each knee. Start the circles going in the opposite direction of what you did first, or the other way. And now reverse the direction of the circles. Bring the feet back down to the mat, roll over to your right side, use the hands to bring yourself up to seated. So you could face the side of the mat, depending on what kind of a surface you're working on. If you want to keep the heels down on the mat, if you're on carpet, it really doesn't matter. Just face whatever direction you end up in. And then you'll take this right foot, bring it in. So sometimes this foot wants to come all the way over to the leg. You could do it that way, but some of you have the ability to bring the foot to center, pointing the toes forward. So if that works in your body, go for it. But if it's going more toward the leg, it's not a big deal. You may want blocks for this pose. You could even sit on a block on the lowest height if you'd like to prop the hips up. So from here, we're going straight forward with our fold, not to one side. So as you fold forward, you could take the blocks with you. I like using them as armrests and just staying here. This feels like a soft and easy place for me to be, but you could lift the blocks up to whatever height makes the most sense. You could stretch the arms forward and keep the blocks out in front of you if you feel like you get more length in the spine and it's a place that you can just be still in. Or you could build the blocks one on top of the other and rest the forehead down and the hands just come down. So see which one you like the best. And if you don't have blocks, just bring the hands down to the mat in front of you as you fold forward. So half butterfly, our first hip opening, starting to move our way down into the legs, the lower half of the body. So we'll be in this region of the body for quite a while. So don't feel like you need to go too far into this pose. You'll start to make your way back up to seated. If you're using any props in front of you, just set them back behind you so you have the mat free. You'll use the right hand to bring the knee back to center. Bring the feet to the mat so you can grab onto both thighs, keeping the feet wide, hands back behind you. We'll take windshield wipers as a counter before we transition over to the other side. And you'll find your way back to seated. Legs aren't as wide as they can go, but it's a wide-legged seat. And then you'll grab onto the back of the left thigh to bend the leg and bring the left foot in. Maybe it goes toward the leg, or maybe you can get it so that the toes point straight forward and the foot is centered with the body. Doesn't have to be perfect. If you're using blocks, grab those, bring those back in front of you, and then start to fold forward, maybe using the blocks as armrests under the hands or maybe under the head. And this side might be a different story. So don't feel like you can't adjust the blocks higher or lower to accommodate this hip. Let the head and the neck go. Close the eyes. Just letting yourself marinate in this pose. And come back up to seated. Any props in front of you, go back behind you, and you'll open up this right leg or this left leg just to get the sole of the foot down. Bring the other sole of the foot down, keeping the legs wide, hands back behind you, back to windshield wipers, knees going side to side. So we did half butterfly on each side. Now we'll come into a wide-legged straddle. So you'll come back to seated, extend the legs out in front of you, not as wide as you can go. If blocks were helpful for the first two poses, then it'll probably be helpful here. So you can start to hinge forward at the hips, start to use the blocks however you see fit, or skip them if you're not using them. And it's a wide-legged forward fold. And maybe it looks different than mine. There's so many different versions of this, so don't feel like you have to come all the way forward. Maybe you're feeling enough if you just come a little bit forward and you stay on the fingertips. Some of you might even have the hands back behind you with the chest lifted, if this is a tight area of the body for you. And we'll start to come back up to seated slowly. If you have any props, bring them back behind you. You'll come back to windshield wipers with the hands back behind you, soles of the feet to the mat, moving the knees side to side, hips and legs becoming more open with all of these poses. So we'll do one more pose. This time, if you're seated facing the side of the mat, you'll want to turn back around so you're facing forward on the mat. And you'll bring the right shin in front of the left, coming into an easy cross-legged seat. Then shifting side to side a couple of times until you feel like you're even on the sit bones. So 3 options for the upper body with this one. Let me show you all 3. You could start with the hands back behind you, just sitting back reclined, working the knees down toward the mat. This might be enough. This is option A. Or you could start to fold forward, putting some weight on the hip opening this way. This is option B, letting the head and the neck go. Obviously, you can use blocks however you want to for that one. Option C, hands come back behind you. You lift the hips and push the glutes forward so the lower back has plenty of space. Maybe you come down onto the forearms. If this feels okay, you can come all the way down onto the back with the head down on the mat. So this is the third option. It's a different option. Check it out. See if it works in your body. Skip it if it doesn't. Try one of the other two if this isn't a good one. So I'll talk you through the lying back down one again. If you're going forward, stay there, you're good. If you're coming all the way back, hands back behind you, lift the hips. You want to push the glutes forward toward the feet and then come down onto the forearms. And this is just so if the meat of the glutes is going up toward the shoulders, it takes away from the space from the lower back, and that can be uncomfortable. And then gently come down onto your back, head rests down, arms can be down by the sides. But we did do a lot of upper body opening. So another option could be reaching the arms overhead and clasping opposite elbows. Arms are still resting down on the mat, heads down on the mat. This can be a nice shape for some of us. If it becomes too much, arms just go down by the sides. Close eyes, come back to your breath. If you're on your back, take note of which forearm is on top if the arms are overhead and you're clasping opposite elbows. Bring the arms down by the sides. So you can bring the forearms and the hands down to the mat enough so that you can press into them to lift the head up, start to walk the elbows in toward the body, coming back up onto the hands. We'll all come back to this shape with the hands back behind you. Separate the feet wide and move the knees side to side, windshield wipers. So you'll definitely want this time. A few more times, side to side. And this time you'll come to seated with the left shin in front of the right. Lift the hips up and then set them back down again. You're trying to cross a mid shin, but if that feels tight, you can open up the knees a little bit wider. So same options as before. Maybe hands come back behind you, you sit up reclined. Maybe you fold forward over the legs, or you could try bringing the hands back behind you, lifting the hips, pushing the glutes forward, coming down onto the forearms, and maybe all the way down onto the back, head resting on the mat. If this works, bring the arms overhead and clasp opposite elbows the other way. So the other forearm goes on top. Close the eyes wherever you are. Start to settle in. Make sure you haven't gone too deep into the pose too quickly. So there's room for you to explore and go deeper as you begin to open up into the shape. This is the pose that helps me feel connected to my body and also disconnected from my body enough to remember that it's a vehicle that I'm driving every day. It's the only one we get. So we want to take care of it. But we also want to use it, explore all the range of motion that it has. Find those boundaries without going beyond them. And learning what it's capable of doing. If you have the arms clasped overhead, reach the arms back behind you, just finding a nice stretch. Then bring the arms down by the sides, elbows come down and hands come down. Lift the head first and then start to walk the elbows back, coming up onto the forearms. And then one hand at a time, lifting the chest. Coming back to seated, and we'll all have the hands back behind us, sitting reclined, separating the feet wide, knees side to side, back to windshield wipers. Final one. Before we start to transition into Shavasana. So for Shavasana today, keeping the knees elevated could be really nice. So if you have a bolster, I would take that and bring it underneath the knees. So you'll just slide it underneath you. If you have a blanket or a pillow, this could be nice for the head. So I'm going to take my blanket, bring it back to a square, and then fold it in half one more time. So it's like a rectangle, and bring that back behind me. So this is a good option, keeping the knees elevated. You'll just scoot the hips closer to the bolster, come down onto your back, find that pillow and adjust it so that it's supporting the neck and the head. Feet are a little wider than hip width distance. You want to turn the toes out so they just relax. Legs are soft. Then arms down by the sides with the palms facing up. And they don't need to be all the way up against the body. You can widen the arms, wider than the shoulders, wider than the feet. And then let the fingers curl so the hands are relaxed. Close the eyes, letting the eyelids become heavy. The jaw becomes heavy. Still keeping the lips closed. Soften the forehead. Widening the space between the eyebrows. Starting to descend into Shavasana, final relaxation pose. You'll start to wiggle the fingers and the toes, deepening the breath, taking deeper inhales in through the nose. Exhale out of the mouth if you'd like. Reach the arms overhead, stretching out through the legs at the same time. And walking the feet in, bending the knees, rolling over to your right side. You can keep the head on the pillow if you're using one and just lying on your side in the fetal position. Using the left hand to bring yourself up to an easy cross-legged seat. You're welcome to sit on a blanket, a bolster, or the mat. Sitting up tall with the eyes closed. And bringing the hands together in front of you. Keep that lift of the chest as you start to bow the head to honor and acknowledge your heart and spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thanks so much for joining and sharing your practice. Even if you're doing the recorded version of the class, that energy is still being put out into the world and all the people around you. So hope that made you feel good in your body and your minds and your spirit too. See you next time.